Lab assistant's 70% body burns in apartment blaze. Injected with superadaptive black bell nanoliquid. Survives 16 days of torture, then begs for the fire. My cousin once said something that stuck with me. I don't believe in hell. There's no kind of suffering people can't adapt to, or even start to value. I've reflected on that a lot. As long as we can perceive the world around us, we're capable of forming attachments to it. Spend enough time online, and you'll see the kind of disturbing things people have learned to enjoy, and I'm not sure I'm any different. It all began in 2016. I was in my second year working as a lab assistant for a pharmaceutical company in the Midwest, the one with the blue sunflower logo. The pay was modest, but the benefits were excellent. My life was stuck in a loop, long hours, brief sleep, and then back to work again. I lived in a third-floor apartment in a sleek, modern building with a giant elevator and mirrored hallways. The company had an agreement with the complex. Employees got reduced rent. It made the place feel more like an extension of work than a home, but I ended up appreciating the convenience. Then came the fire. I don't know what caused it, but the ground floor erupted into flames. I had just gotten out of the shower when the alarm started. I barely managed to grab a towel. It all happened so fast. Before you even register the heat, you can feel the oxygen being pulled away. It snatches your breath. The heat was intense. Just stepping into the hallway left you blistering. I tried heading for the stairs while the neighbor across from me locked himself inside. The last I saw of him, he and his family were watching me through a narrowing crack in the door, their eyes catching the glow of the flames creeping up from below. I didn't make it far. The smoke warped everything, and I lost my bearings. I kept pushing forward, but it was already too late. I knocked on doors, begging to be let in. No one came. I collapsed near the elevator, pressing against it as the heat began to melt the metal, searing the skin right off my hand. Your throat seizes up. You can see the heat rippling over your arms, forming boils that burst like blisters. Right before losing consciousness, your mind disconnects. You stop believing what's happening is real. I should have been panicking, but I didn't. I felt numb. It felt like watching someone else's life unravel. It couldn't be real. It was too far removed from anything I'd ever known. That's the thing about going through something completely unfamiliar. You can't process it as reality. That's the closest I can come to describing it. Dying. I was unconscious for maybe 30 seconds before firefighters found me. They wrapped me in a blanket and carried me out. I had second-degree burns across my body. Some areas were worse. Ironically, the third-degree burns didn't hurt as much. The nerves had been destroyed. The pain only began once the healing started. Coming to was surreal. My face was entirely bandaged, but I didn't understand that. I just thought the lights were off. I couldn't feel anything thanks to a generous dose of morphine and a surprisingly effective corporate health plan. I remember someone talking to me, their voice muffled. I could only hear from one side. My eardrum had burst, and the left side of my head had fused from the burns. "Oh, thank God," someone said. It was my younger sister, Sammy. She had flown in from Ottawa. The next few days came in fragments. I drifted in and out of consciousness. My dreams were full of pain. I dreaded the moments when the meds would wear off. Occasionally, I caught bits of reality. A machine's beep, Sammy's voice on a call, light hitting the bandages over my eyes and irritating a raw nerve. I prayed not to feel anything. Pain dominated everything. It wasn't just physical. It was overwhelming. Your entire body fighting to repair itself and losing, over and over. One night, I sensed someone come in. They spoke to Sammy, their tone somber. She cried. Later, someone else arrived. Whatever they said, her reaction changed. There was a shift in her voice. "Please," she said, "do whatever it takes." They rolled me into an elevator and out into the open. The breeze felt like sharp pins against my skin. Transport. Sammy's voice echoed faintly as they moved me. "We'll take good care of him." I felt the prick of a needle, and then nothing. I was out for at least a day and a half. When I woke, I was staring at a ceiling. My face was no longer bandaged. A soft gray film covered my left eye. I blinked instinctively and raised my arm. That's when I noticed it. My arm was wrapped in a thick, dark substance. It looked like ink, or some kind of putty. It clung to me, but I could barely feel it. I'd never seen anything like it before. It covered everything: my body, face, even my eyes. But I could still see. It functioned like a one-way mirror. Up. Close. It was almost transparent. And somehow I felt fine. No pain, no stiffness, nothing at all. I sat up, accidentally dislodging a couple of wires from my arm. When I looked down, that all-covering ink-like coating on my skin began to dry out and sink in, like morning dew vanishing into a dry lawn. I didn't feel a thing, not even a slight sensation. A nurse arrived shortly after, ready to respond. Sammy was right behind her, but when they saw me standing there, the tension in the room lifted, like a cool breeze had passed through. I'd never seen my sister look like that before. Her hair was thinning near her ears, dark circles under her eyes looked almost bruised, and her face had that sunken look of someone who'd forgotten how to smile. But when she saw me, something in her came back to life. She lit up. She stepped toward me with open arms, then hesitated. "Can I hug you?" she asked. "Are you okay?" "I think so," I replied. "Yeah." We embraced, and over her shoulder, I noticed a corporate rep waiting in the hallway. If this is confusing, don't worry, I was just as lost. Let's break it down. Details were limited. The phrase Black Bell Project came up. Someone mentioned super adaptive nanoliquid. Turns out, Sammy had approved an experimental treatment on my behalf. I must have already been listed as a viable test subject, probably because I was a loyal employee, and breaking confidentiality would have cost me everything. The agreement involved regular check-ins and participating in research. I was technically free to opt out, but doing so likely meant ending up back in a hospital bed. So it wasn't much of a choice, but I didn't hold it against them. They were doing what benefited them. And honestly, the fact that I could walk again, that alone, made it worth signing a non-disclosure. When I returned to the office a few weeks later, people were talking. They said the tech had been developed in one of our branches in Vietnam. It had come up in memos related to vacuum seal treatments and oxygen-restricted environments. I'd seen those notes myself, but I had no idea they were tied to regenerative uses. Reading about something is one thing. Witnessing it is another. Some coworkers didn't buy my story. They thought I'd taken time off, riding the aftermath of a fire that had destroyed my apartment. I could have shown them photos, but somehow, I felt like that would just raise more doubts. I let them believe what they wanted. Management knew the truth. That was enough. And slowly I fell back into my routine of long hours and little sleep. Sammy stayed nearby for a while to help me adjust. Other than that, life went on. But surface appearances can be deceiving. At night, I'd lie awake, imagining that pain waiting beneath the surface of my skin. What if something went wrong with the treatment? Could it all return? Could a single misstep undo everything? Sleep became difficult. I'd close my eyes but remain wide awake, haunted by the sensation of fire crawling over my body. I could still feel the heat, smell burnt flesh, and see pieces of myself dissolve into ash. Those images never left. 2 weeks into my new normal, I experienced my first panic attack. A coworker brought in a birthday cake. They blew out the candles during lunch. That small flicker of flame reflecting off someone's face triggered something in me. Heat. My heart raced. I imagined my skin trying to sweat, but the pores had been sealed shut. The pain wasn't real, but the memories felt as sharp as ever. turned down a slice of cake, and rushed to the bathroom. I vomited and sat in a corner with my eyes closed tight, but even that didn't help. The heat clung to me. That's the thing with panic attacks. You can't rationalize your way out. You just wait for it to pass and hope the next one is easier. Later that night, I talked to Sammy over dinner. She decided to stay a few more weeks. I hadn't asked, but she offered anyway. She'd made baked potatoes. We didn't have proper dishes yet, just paper plates and plastic forks. A bare light bulb hung overhead. "You talk in your sleep," she said as the oven beeped. "I can hear you through the wall." What do I say? It's not words, really, just stretched out sounds. But they almost sound like something. I'll try to keep it down. She gave me a sympathetic look. She knew I couldn't control it, and that even if I wanted to, I couldn't. Things got worse. Nightmares became more intense. I'd wake up gasping, feeling the heat again. My anxiety would hit without warning, even on days when things seemed okay. Eventually, good days were the exception. One day, heading home from work, I stopped at a red light. I kept my hands on the wheel, watching the light glow. A radio DJ mentioned playing some classic dad rock, then queued up Hotter Than Hell by Kiss. It's a fun song, but it hit me in the wrong way. I stared at that red light, hoping not to see yellow. Something about that warm amber hue pulled me back, to the hallway, to the pain. My hand pressed to the heated elevator door. Skin, burning, flesh cooking. I closed my eyes, and then I felt something, a cool, faint layer spreading over my skin. The treatment, still working. I think someone honked. Maybe the light turned green, but I couldn't bring myself to check. I kept my eyes shut, afraid of what I'd see or not see. Maybe it would hurt. Maybe it was all gone. 100 what-ifs kept my hands locked on the steering wheel and my eyes tightly closed. Then, a spark. It felt like I'd triggered it. A flicker of energy reacting to my skin. Fire. From the outside, it probably looked like an explosion. Windows shattered as the pressure blew out, and the car burst into flames. The pain was immediate and intense. I couldn't even cry out. Single flame lingered on my eyelids as they fused shut. My nerves screamed as the skin peeled back and the bones in my hands were left exposed. It all happened in an instant. Like someone flicking off the switches in my brain one by one. Sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, thought. I couldn't breathe. There was no air. I couldn't tell if I was sitting, standing, any awareness of myself was gone. They later told me I'd been burning for nearly 2 full minutes before a passerby managed to pull me from the wreckage. I was covered in a thick black liquid. At the time, they assumed it was motor oil. People on the street put out the flames. The treatment kept me alive through it. Not comfortably, not quietly. It kept me right at the edge, alive but enduring. It felt endless. Eventually, the paramedics arrived. They never spoke about what they called my second miraculous survival. A few days later, I walked out of the hospital. No questions asked. Physically, the treatment had returned me to perfect condition. Mentally, though, there were lingering effects. The firefighters had no idea what had really happened. The corporation did. Apparently, my fixation on fire was triggering the treatment's adaptive response. It thought this was the new normal for me. That burning was something I wanted. That's how they explained it to me. Knowing the cause helped a little, but not much. Trying not to think about something often makes it worse. It's like any bad habit. Telling yourself to stop only reinforces the urge. Knowing that obsessing about fire might cause another episode made the thoughts harder to escape. Still, Sammy stayed. She worked out ways to reduce stress and keep the house safe. I started sleeping in the bathtub. We removed anything flammable. No curtains, no plastics. and kept a fire blanket close by. It wasn't ideal, but we adapted. Just knowing the safety precautions were there helped ease the tension. I thought about it less. I kept going to weekly check-ins. There were forms to fill out, scales of pain, behavior, and sensations. Most of it was routine, but a few questions were tailored to my case. The kind of things that didn't have clear answers. A different researcher each week, same polite tone. It became clear I wasn't the only test subject. The questions implied others were having their own issues, but not the same kind. Some examples. How often do you forget to breathe? How often do you forget to sleep? Has your sense of touch changed? Answer options ranged from hourly to monthly. I made more changes at home. More fire blankets. A full tub before. Bed, in case I felt another episode coming. The ink from the treatment would seep out and adjust to my body's temperature. It really did respond in real time. Sammy tried to stay optimistic. One morning, while I was getting ready for work, she was scrubbing out the tub. I asked if she was okay with doing that. It's no different than changing bandages, she said. You just have to adjust. At least it doesn't hurt, right? But trauma has a way of sinking into you. The tough days become the standard. The good ones feel rare and distant, like a memory you can't quite hold on to. That one perfect day, with no anxiety, full sleep, a decent dream. A day when you feel like taking care of yourself, dressing well, living fully. I couldn't do any of that. I lived cautiously, avoiding clothes I liked, sleeping in the tub, keeping distance from others, all to avoid triggering another episode. But even that wasn't always enough. One time, walking from the supermarket to my car, something snapped. I don't even know what caused it. Just fire. The groceries burned in my hands. I dropped to the ground, skin blistering and cracking, left in pain and covered in ash. It was short, but long enough to feel everything. Another time, at work, I sensed it coming. I hid in the bathroom. The fire alarm went off as flames erupted. The sprinklers helped, and the burns weren't as bad. I could still walk out, wrapped in a jacket, naked from the waist down, covered in blisters. After that, the company put me on paid leave. We were supposed to develop an action plan with a therapist, but finding one cleared for this level of secrecy was a challenge. So while it was being sorted out, I stayed home, doing my best not to think about anything that could trigger another flare-up. It was weighing on me, and on Sammy too. One night, it happened while I was in the bath. I woke up from a nightmare in complete darkness. My eyes were open, but I couldn't see anything. I panicked, convinced they'd fused shut again. That panic turned into fire. I stumbled out, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Sammy rushed in to help. She burned her hands trying to reach me. I accidentally burned her neck when I pushed her away. I climbed back into the tub, trying to turn on the water, but with no skin left on my fingers, it wasn't easy. Blood made everything slippery, and the faucet handles were stiff. The alarm was blaring, but Sammy managed to shut it off. Neighbors came to check what was happening, and she turned them away, wounded, trying to stay calm. I lay there, in the tub, watching the flames go out, one by one. Back in the quiet, in the dark. After that night, things changed. Sammy didn't want to leave, but her injuries made it clear she needed to. Watching her wince from something as simple as a sandwich broke me. So I lied. I told her the company was sending a live-in care provider. It had been mentioned, vaguely. She left in a cab. I watched from the kitchen window. For the first time in a while, I felt like she'd be safe. Away from me. I tried new ways to cope, went out more. Drinking helped, at least when there were distractions. Loud music, busy bars, strangers dancing, anything to keep my mind off that dangerous first thought. One night, I got drunk and tried to turn it into a party trick. I told some people at the bar I could light myself on fire. They laughed, thought I was joking. I wasn't. When the flames came, their faces turned to panic. They didn't understand what the treatment did. When the ink coated my skin, I looked like burning coal. People screamed. Someone called the police. One fainted. I stood as long as I could, bones cracking, muscles pulling tight. Then my knees gave out, and I collapsed into a puddle. But the treatment kept me from drowning. 1 inch of water, and it could have ended me. By the time the police arrived, I was already gone, my burned clothes in a pile behind me. I knew the back streets well enough to disappear. That night, I sat on my balcony thinking it through. I could keep going like this, hoping for a change. Or I could keep fighting through each day, never knowing when the next fire would come. No matter what, that fear was always there. Looking up at the stars, I felt a strange connection. They burned, too. But they'd never known anything else. Maybe that was the answer. The next morning, I took the car and drove into the desert. I parked, left a note, no valuables, and placed the keys under the tire. I folded my clothes and tucked them under the hood. Didn't want them ruined. I wanted something clean to come back to, if I returned. Then I walked. I let the sun press into my skin, felt the heat rising in the back of my mind. "Come on," I said quietly. "Let's go." I made myself think about it. I deliberately pushed myself into that mental spiral, letting the sensations take control. "Come on," I said aloud. "Just do it." And when the fire came, I felt oddly relieved. I didn't resist. The flames sealed my eyes shut. The air was pulled from my lungs. My body cracked and twisted, breaking at every joint. My senses vanished. I couldn't speak. The treatment kept me alive, but I was stuck in a cycle, burning, healing, then burning again. The scent of scorched skin, ammonia, and singed hair came and went with each round. Light flared against my damaged corneas. A screeching in my ears pulsed like a tide crashing through my skull. The pain didn't stop. Time stretched out, and no one was coming. I realized then, what had I done? Taste didn't register. Sometimes a hint of blood left a faint metallic aftertaste, but it passed quickly. Touch followed the same pattern, either overwhelming pain or total numbness. Eventually, I gave up trying to breathe. I kept my throat closed, letting the treatment sustain me. My heartbeat slowed, adapted. With concentration, I discovered I could trigger small muscle movements during moments of tissue recovery. Barely enough to shift, but possible. I remember lying in the sand. It must have been night. The light was dimmer. I moved my hand into view. My fingers appeared charred, skeletal and coated in ash. Patches of liquefied fat darkened the ground beneath me. I tried to think clearly, but my mind wasn't functioning properly. It felt like a barrier had formed in the back of my brain, keeping deeper thoughts out. I couldn't remember my own name. I could only hold on to brief, simple ideas, short bursts of awareness. As my lungs fluctuated, I focused on producing basic sounds, mostly vowels. I settled on repeating E and O to reassure myself I was still conscious. Eo, eo, eo. Deprived of real input, my brain began to fill in the gaps. The noise in my ears morphed into music and voices. The flashes of light resembled figures, angels maybe. I imagined talking to them, and the pain became background noise. Some of these imagined figures sat beside me. One had a voice like a piano, speaking in soft melodies. Another laid next to me, arms around me, their breath like a cool breeze. They told stories about distant places, a beach where no one feels alone, an island with pink sand, a tree reaching toward the moon. simple images and tales looping in the flames, asking me to stay. Slowly, my basic needs faded. When pain is your constant state, things like water or sleep seem irrelevant. I let go. The pain became a kind of stability. Over time, I realized I could shift focus, manage which senses were active. Turn off vision, I'd think, and hearing too. Instead, I'd direct everything toward muscle control. It hurt more, but I could move, barely. I doubt anyone saw me. But if they had, they would have seen a burned figure rise from the ashes and face the moon. I wandered the desert. I didn't care if I stepped on sharp rocks or debris. The wind fed the fire, and the more it hurt, the more I could move. That pain became fuel, and when the air hit my lungs, I could finally scream. I howled at the moon. Eo, 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 time lost its structure. Days didn't start or end. Everything blurred. Thoughts came and went without warning. I made up words, using meanings shaped by the pain and hallucinations. Words I would forget almost immediately. Sometimes I imagined others like me. People, burning in the distance, dancing on the edge of my vision. Graceful movements, smoke trailing behind, little lights fading out. I mourned them. Sometimes I laughed, but mostly I endured. I'd collapse to my knees and stay there, burning, immobile. I gave in to scattered thoughts that became a kind of mantra, broken vowels whispered through damaged teeth. Maybe a prayer. My clearest memory is kneeling in that sand. Even with my eyes shut, I knew I was no longer in the world I knew. I was somewhere else entirely, a place of flame, praying to an ocean of molten metal. Another lost figure enduring its fate. Eo, Eo, Eo. The fire-born figures listened and danced. The sea of pain became comfort. There was no more heat, just a sense of belonging. I had adapted. I had changed. I opened my eyes. I wasn't alone. A dozen others stood with me, covered in the same black ink. They too had adapted. They were strong and strange. They had walked through different nightmares and emerged, transformed. Brothers, sisters, a shared lineage forged through pain. Joy turned to terror. I felt caught in a strange eternity. Nothing moved, nothing changed. I began to believe that this stasis was the natural state. That fire, once a friend to humanity, had now consumed me. I was on the outside of life looking in, and yet something human remained. I hadn't fully let go, but I was close. It was peaceful in a way. No pressure, no expectations. Was that really so bad? Then it rained. I didn't feel the first drop. But as the rain continued, the fire dimmed. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I was free of pain. But it made me ill. My body's systems, long ignored, came back online, one by one. Sight, hearing, taste. Each return was worse than the last. I cried out, pleading to return. But I'd forgotten how to ask. My broken thoughts couldn't reach the place I'd come from. So I lay there, hoping sleep would take me back. But it never did. My car had been towed. People had searched for me, but found nothing. What felt like a few days had actually been 16. And for the second time in under a year, Sammy watched me return. Alive. Again. The company labeled the treatment too risky. No detailed explanation. Maybe it was the talk I had with the therapist about ink-covered beings and wanting to burn again. Whatever the reason, they shut it down. They activated a kill switch, forcing the treatment from my body. I coughed. Up a lump of metallic residue, which they immediately placed in a nitrogen-cooled container with a blue sunflower emblem. Seeing the treatment outside of me was strange. It had been a part of me. Removing it felt like losing an internal organ. But even without it, I still had the same thoughts, the same memories. Only now, I didn't know if I missed the fire or feared it. Maybe both. At least now I couldn't hurt anyone else. I remained on paid leave. I stayed with Sammy for a while. A change of scenery helped. I met new people and started to feel grounded again. It's easy to overlook the small things when your mind is fractured. Sometimes a kind word or a cold drink is all it takes to feel okay. Eventually, I returned to my old apartment. I went back to work. Found a new place, one without a tub. I stopped avoiding conversations. I watched the lights at intersections. Pain no longer scared me. After what I'd been through, little else could. And if it ever returned, I knew I could handle it. This was years ago. Life looks very different now. I'm engaged. I've moved to a new town. New job, same company. We have a dog. Still, on some nights, I think back. I picture those ink-covered figures watching from a distance, waiting for me to remember, to return. Maybe a piece of me is still with them, and sometimes I wonder what's worse, fearing the fire or longing for it. Like my cousin once said, I don't believe in hell. I don't think suffering lasts forever, but sometimes when it rains, I miss the burn.